All members of the jury are present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. Did anyone discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else? Do any research related to the case, or was anyone exposed to any reports of the case during the last break? Let the record reflect there are no hands. Again, thank you all very much. We're going to pick up where we left off, and I will ask the state to begin their rebuttal argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, I want to remind you all that we are here in the case of the state of Florida versus Nicole Nachtman. We are not here on the case of Nicole Nachtman versus Miriam Deans. And I can understand if you all are probably a little bit confused because at least half of Ms. Hersey Volguera's closing dealt with Ms. Deans. Well, let me remind you all a little bit about Ms. Deans. Ms. Deans grew up in a military family. She was the only girl. She had 5 brothers. She became a nurse. She joined the Navy. She eventually made a naval captain. Miriam Deans also went through a very difficult and bitter divorce, a very difficult and bitter child custody battle, and eventually was trying to raise and provide for 3 children while working for the military. She would often have to leave her children with family in Tampa. Nicole Nachtman grew up an Army brat, basically. She was having to transfer all the time. Whenever Miriam Deans would get deployed, Nicole Nachtman needed to go somewhere. So she would bring her to Tampa so she could be with family. What else is she going to do? But yet she's going to be blamed because Nicole Nachtman had to go to so many schools. We never said, and I said it in my opening, that Nicole Nachtman did not have an easy life. I said that. We've never tried to portray a perfect picture. We never have. I've never tried to tell you, and I never argued to you up here in opening, that Ms. Deans was a perfect parent. She was not. She made mistakes. But those mistakes, ladies and gentlemen, do not give Nicole Nachtman the right to kill her. They do not. She might not have been super loving. Clearly she wasn't. You've heard testimony about that. But she did the best she could, according to Dr. Lazaro, for Nicole Nachtman, the best way she knew how to parent. Ladies and gentlemen, children grow up in foster care and don't have parents doting love on them, and they don't go out and kill people. Just because you've had a hard life does not give you the right to kill people when you want to. It just does not. And the only reason we're even discussing much of this stuff with Miriam Deans and the raising of Nicole Nachtman is because they put forth a defense of battered child syndrome. Nicole Nachtman was not a child when this occurred. I want to remind you all of that. She was 21 years old. But they put forth this defense of battered child syndrome because it goes to self-defense. And I want to remind you also, ladies and gentlemen, this goes only as to the count involving Miriam Deans. I believe that's count 2 of the indictment. It only applies to her. Self-defense does not apply whatsoever to Robert Deans. It just does not. So this is put on to a self-defense instruction. Because in a self-defense instruction, you have to have a reasonable belief of bodily harm in order to defend yourself, basically. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's pretty much how it goes. And you'll see the instruction, and the judge will read you the law on it. But with battered child syndrome, when you put that onto the self-defense instruction, it says you have to look at it from the mind of a battered child syndrome. Was it reasonable for a person under her circumstances to believe she was in fear of death or great bodily harm? And I submit to you it was not reasonable for her to believe that. For many reasons. Now, Dr. Lazaro has already told you she did not feel that what Nicole suffered, while she never excused it or said it was good, did not rise to the level of battered child syndrome. We talked about the physical abuse and how it was limited. All three doctors said it was limited. They came up with 3 instances in her entire 21 years of actual physical abuse that they would categorize as physical abuse. 3 in 21 years. Now, that's not to excuse that. That's not to say that Ms. Deans was ever right to do anything like that to her child. We are not excusing that. Okay, and I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm telling you is to tell you that Ms. Deans was correct in kicking her daughter for not answering a question or pushing her head down onto a table. None of that was correct. The question is, does it rise to the level of battered child syndrome? Dr. Lazaro explained to you, and let me remind you, even Dr. Heidi said, if it was just this physical abuse, I would say, no, this doesn't go to that level. Dr. Lazaro explained to you how it's a process where they get battered, then there's an apology, then it comes back up again and get battered again, and it's a cycle. What have we heard about here? One when she was 3 years old, or in 3rd grade, I can't remember which one it was, and then one when she was in 10th grade, and one when she was in 11th grade. Those were the 3 instances we're talking about. So, Dr. Heidi knows that that's not going to be enough for battered child syndrome. So she looks at other avenues and other areas where Ms. Nachtman might have been abused. So she turns to the verbal and the psychological. And yes, there is some evidence of that as well. There is some evidence, you heard from Joseph Carey, that the mom could be kind of abrasive and say mean things to them from time to time. He never said he ever heard her say one thing to Nicole. He said she would say things like that. That's who she is. But he could not say a specific instance that he remembers her ever saying anything like that to Nicole. Because I want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that majority, just the 3 instances of violence and all of the psychological and verbal abuse you heard from, especially the verbal abuse, all came from the self-reporting of Nicole Nachtman. All of it. A woman we know who has no trouble lying to get out of trouble. No trouble at all. She'll fake her grades. She'll buy a storage unit for a bike. She'll tell detectives that she's been in Florida State for more than 2 days. So we're to rely on this skank and all these other words that were uttered to her at specific times in her life as true. You all can weigh that for what it is. But does that, all of that combined, still arise to the level of a battered child? You have other evidence you can look at aside from the words of Nicole Nachtman. And that is those emails. I urge you to look through those emails. And I'm sorry, I call them emails. I do this all the time. They're texts. I get them confused in my head. Okay. But I would ask you to look through those. And I think what you will see is that it's a normal back and forth relationship between a mother and daughter. Now, it wasn't loving, but we've already established that Miriam Deans was not a loving type. Not one to show affection openly like that. But if you read through them, you'll see silly things like, oh, so-and-so's bringing a present for you, and da-da-da-da. And then she'll say, are you mad at me? And Miriam Deans replies, I could never be mad at you, Nicole. You'll find that text in there. I could never be mad at you, Nicole. That is hard evidence that you can look at and see for yourself. You know, and I want you all to remember this too. You heard from Dr. Lazaro that her mom was trying to do the best for Nicole. And some of these things, I think some of us would agree, is probably inappropriate. certainly some of these fat-shaming comments that we hear. But if you look at the text, they're not fat-shaming. It's a nurse saying, this is what your weight should be. Remember, don't eat after 7. Things that a mom might say to help a child or a young adult to keep their weight down. Remember, she's a nurse. She never says, you're getting fat, Nicole. Not a single text in there that says anything like that. The liposuction, Nicole was not a child then. I want y'all to remember that. She was over 18 when she got the liposuction. And she had a choice in that. No doctor would ever perform a procedure without...
Objection, the facts not in evidence.
I'll sustain, move on.
All right. You are hearing from the defense the worst moments of the relationship between Miriam Deans and Nicole Nachtman. Miriam Deans isn't alive right now to tell you or explain to you or give you her side of what happened. In some of these moments, in frustration, when she might have hurt Nicole, I'm sure if she were alive today, she may regret. But this is a 21-year picture, and you're only seeing these brief moments of this time. But none of it arises to the level of battered child. The defense wants to downplay the things her mom got her. Tried to say that the state is saying it's a perfect life. I'm not saying it's perfect, but her mom did provide for her in a great way. She worked hard to provide for her. She gave her things she needed. She needed a car to get around. You got a car, Nicole. She got Florida prepaid. Florida prepaid takes time to pay for. She got her computers when she needed computers. She tried to put her in schools that she thought would be good for her. Family may have objected, but remember, it's not the family's choice. And you are not here to judge her choice of where she put Nicole in school. You're here to judge whether that abuse arose to the level of battered child syndrome, and then whether, with that, it was reasonable for Nicole Nachtman to believe that she was in fear of imminent death or great bodily harm. Don't forget, she could have left. If she was so scared she had her room, she could have been in Tallahassee, miles away from her mom. She chose to stay. Why? Because by that point in time, Nicole Nachtman had already made the decision in her head that she was done with her mom. She wanted her out of her life, and this was the way she was going to do it. Now, I know she'd already killed Bob, but that's only one body. She could have moved on and saved. But no, she because her plan was to kill her mom, she had to follow it through to the end. Even when Miriam Deans does something that could easily be perceived as something really good, she shows up at her child's school to pick her up. Nicole thinks Bob's coming. And she even plays along. Oh yeah, Bob's on his way up there. He'll come get you. And then she comes out. Now how do we know, ladies and gentlemen, that's not just a fun thing that she wanted to do? Surprise her daughter. Spend some time driving back down to Tampa with her daughter. How do we know? We don't. But what does Dr. Ewing say? Oh, she's gaslighting her. If that doesn't show you bias on the part of that doctor, I don't know what does. He's making a judgment about Miriam Dean's decisions without having any idea. That is bias. You have to look at his opinion very carefully. And I confronted him. I said, do you have any evidence or any reason to believe she was just coming to surprise her? Well, no. Well, then why did you tell this jury a little while ago that she was gaslighting her? They complained that she never went up to Tallahassee to see her. Well, there she did. And instead of being like, oh, she did a good thing, oh, she was gaslighting her. Miriam can't win for losing. But I remind you, this case is not about Nicole Nachtman versus Miriam Deans. It's about State of Florida versus Nicole Nachtman. Please keep that in mind. So when you look at self-defense, you need to look and see what were the circumstances. What happened at that moment? All three doctors testified that Nicole Nachtman never says that her mom was coming at her in an aggressive or angry fashion. She never says that. Her mom was surprised. The trap had worked perfectly. Perfect. Her mom's like, Nicole, what the are you doing here? It had worked perfect. If her mom had pulled up and seen the car, her mom might have been coming in like a little more aggressively, like, what's going on? No, she didn't want that. She wanted to catch her mom right off guard, and she did. And there's no evidence whatsoever that the mother did anything to give her a reason to believe she was in fear of death or great bodily harm. Nothing. She didn't want the repercussions of her mom yelling at her, mad at her because she didn't do what she was supposed to do with the housing. This had nothing to do with her fear of death or great bodily harm. And there is no evidence, ladies and gentlemen, not a scintilla, not even a single piece of evidence to show any sort of aggressive action on the part of Miriam Deans. Nothing. Self-defense doesn't apply here. Not even at all. It's not even a close call. So much talk. Oh, let me also talk about this when it comes to this self-defense. Miss Hersey-Folguera talked a few minutes ago about the bullets in the wound she took. And yes, there was one within 2 feet, the muzzle right here, barrel about 2 feet from the body. And that was the one that was directly to the torso. The one that goes straight front to back. I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that was clearly the first shot. It's also the shot that the medical examiner said had the most blood coming out of the areas where it was shot. So clearly it was the first shot. And what does she say happens after that? Her mom screams. What do the neighbors say they heard? Scream. It was a weird scream, like an agony scream. So that's the first shot. In all likelihood, what is Miriam Deans going to do? She's going to turn from the threat. And you heard Wesley Rowe and Elizabeth Ray both say they heard a bang and then bang, bang, 2 quick succession bangs. So the first one goes front to back and is right here in her front and is pretty close range. The next one comes in her side and goes from her left side across her body. And then there's one right in her head that comes from the back of her head through her ear and comes out towards the front of her head. So her head was turned. She was trying to get away. She was trying to run for her life. But Nicole Nachtman was not going to let her get away. Not now. Not anymore. She was done with her mom. And we can surmise that this is the last wound because it had the least amount of blood in the areas where it traveled. And after this wound, the doctor said most likely she would collapse, which she did. Her arms are by her side. She clearly didn't even try and break her fall. And you see the bruising and the blunt impact, and he said there was very little of on the contusion to show that there was much blood pressure left, if any. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last thing she saw in her life was that woman with a gun to her. So this is not self-defense. But what about Bob? You know, I would say easily 3/4, if not more, of this case has all been discussion about Miriam Deans and Miriam Deans and Miriam Deans. What about Robert Deans? Talk about an innocent, complete innocent man. He had nothing. He did nothing wrong. His only thing he did wrong was to stand in the way of her mom. No evidence he ever abused her, no evidence he ever yelled at her, no evidence he ever did anything to Nicole Nachtman. He put her on his health insurance. We know that because, according to the Air Academy records, he's on his health insurance. He's the stepfather. How close he was to her? I don't know. There's no telling. David Lear, the cousin who gave her the money, says they all seem fine. I would be over and visit 2 or 3 times a week. Now, Eric and George never talked about going to visit the house. You never heard any testimony from them about going to visit the house and see what the house was like. But David did. David got to know Robert Deans. He would help him with projects around the house. Said he was a very nice guy. He's the one who identified him on the picture, in the Publix video. So Robert was very nice. So what did he do to Nicole? Nothing. He did nothing to her. But stand in the way of her ultimate goal. That's all it was. She knew her mom was gone. She was in the house with Robert Deans. And according to the testimony from the doctors, she was contemplating suicide. Am I going to kill myself? She had taken the gun out of the bedroom. And I urge you to look at those pictures too. If you look at the empty gun case, you'll look and see that there's a novel inside it, a Stephen King novel. Why do you think that's there? Because she didn't want them to know that something might have been missing in case they moved the case. So it still had weight to it. That's smart. Suffering from some hallucination and delusion, they don't know what they're doing. She knew what she was doing. She takes that gun and thinks, am I going to kill myself? What does that tell you? Nicole Nachtman knows what a gun can do. She knows it kills. I mean, common sense tells you she does. She's a Florida State University student with average to above average intelligence. She knows what it is. So she decides for herself, no, I want to live. She walks out, comes up from behind Robert Deans and shoots him in the back of the head, killing him. Now let's talk a little bit about insanity, because that's the defense they are attempting to prove to you. And remember, it is their burden to prove to you by clear and convincing evidence. She is presumed sane. As she sits there right now, you're to presume her that she's sane, just like all of us. It's their duty and their job to convince you with clear and convincing evidence that she was not, that she was insane at the time of the offense. So let's start looking into that evidence. Mental infirmity. You'll see in a second, I'll put it up. You all have seen it a bunch of times already, so I know you're going to be very familiar with this when he gets back there with you. But it's important that you all understand it, because it can become somewhat confusing. And that first line that they've read, you've read that a bunch of times. But a person is considered to be insane when, number one, she had a mental infirmity, disease, or defect. We agree. contesting that. You heard so much evidence about, is it schizophrenia? Is it schizotype of personality disorder? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It could be schizophrenia. Dr. Lazaro was going to lose no money if she said, yeah, it's schizophrenic, but she's not insane because of blah, 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 blah. She could have diagnosed her with whatever she wanted. She diagnosed her with a mental disease or defect. So it doesn't matter. She wouldn't have lost any money anyway. Dr. Lazaro was bringing to you what she believed the evidence in her diagnosis to be. Pure and simple. But, in her opinion, it's not as severe as the defense would have you believe. She does not believe that Nicole Nachtman was suffering with delusions. She indicated that the delusion that they keep referring to is that her mom was going to kill her. She has made that up since as a justification for her actions. Nicole Nachtman does not want to think she's a bad person. So she is now justifying it by saying, well, I thought my mom was going to kill me. She says to the doctor, in her statement, she says, you know, if she wasn't going to kill me before, once I kill Bob, then I know she's going to kill me. Dr. Lazaro explained to you that while she suffered some schizophrenic symptoms, and she was on the spectrum, it was not as severe. And certainly not to the point of being psychotic. And she told you some of the things that no psychotic person, no person under a psychosis who has a belief in undergoing a psychotic episode could ever do. A person going to go into a psychotic episode does not have executive function, as she described, does not have the ability to think things through and do things. So what is she doing? What is there evidence that she did not have any psychosis at the time? She was actively speaking with her family members. She saw David after she had killed her stepfather and while she was still planning to kill her mother. David said she seemed normal, had a normal conversation with her. She responded back to him in a normal fashion. She wanted the money. He gave her the money. When am I going to see you again? And she gave him a big hug because she wasn't sure when she'd see him again. Because by that point she had already killed Robert Dean, so she knew she was going to go away. No indication from him that she was acting out of sorts in any manner from her normal manner. He testified to that. She called her grandmother and told her grandmother goodbye. Said she was sorry she didn't get a chance to see her before she leaves. She handled that entire thing with FSU. I mean, she just killed her stepfather, and she's awaiting her mom. And meanwhile, okay, let me deal with this FSU thing. I gotta get now that I got my housing, I can get out of here. I'll go up there to FSU, and I'll make it seem like I've been there the whole time. And she goes through all the things she needed to do to get that housing done. Paid the money, got the forms in, did everything she needed to do. That is a person who's functioning with a clean mind, knows what she's doing, and knows how to do what she's doing. Everyone wants to make it out, well, I'm sorry, not everyone. The defense wants to make it out that poor Nicole Nachtman couldn't take care of herself, couldn't do anything. She moved herself up to school every time. That's a pretty big deal. She did it all by herself. She drives herself up there. She moves herself in. That's pretty big. She went to London by herself. She couldn't clean. She couldn't take care of herself. She couldn't wash her clothes. Well, you heard from the first roommate, the first woman. She testified actually during our case. We let her come in and have her testimony via Skype. And she said, yeah, she could do it. And sometimes she would. I would yell at her and she'd clean up for a little while, but then it would start to go back again. She was just lazy. Just wasn't in her mindset to clean or be clean. But when there's blood everywhere, she can clean that up pretty good. When there's blood on clothes and on sponges and stuff, well, let's clean that up pretty good. She can certainly clean that up. Nicole Nachtman knew how to clean. She's not this meek little girl who doesn't know how to do anything. That's not Nicole Nachtman. She was an average to above average intelligent 21-year-old woman. Nicole planned keeping the car out of the mother's view and parked it away from the house. That is very devious. It's devious to believe that you're setting this trap for her to begin with. But then where she parks, I mean, I urge you all to go back and look at this. She parks in an area almost 2 miles away, an area familiar to her because obviously that's where her brother lives. Her cousin David lives. But an area that's across Ehrlich Road in another subdivision, so that when they hear the shots and the police start coming in like this, she won't be seen in her car leaving the area. She's on foot. Who knows where? She's hiding in bushes, running around trying to make sure she's not seen, and can make it all the way up here and then leave, whoop, right out of here, with her car never even being spotted around the area. That's smart. That's not someone who's insane or doesn't know what they're doing. Certainly not someone who's psychotic at the time. She went up to school. Told her roommate to lie for her and say she was there if anyone asks. After the murder, she met with the police, and there's no evidence of any psychosis at all in the interview. And you all saw that interview. She's oriented to time and place. She can speak with him pretty clearly. She understands his questions. In fact, he doesn't even get a chance to read Miranda. She immediately knows where he's going with that and says, I've been told by my family I should get a lawyer. Is that okay? He's like, yeah, okay. He hadn't even started to tell her Miranda rights. She knew it. And then she went right back to the Ice Princess story. Now everyone the defense keeps bringing up, oh, look at her, she's talking about the Ice Princess. She just killed her mom and stepmom, or stepdad, she's talking about the Ice Princess. Well, what else is she going to talk about? Someone who's trying to cover her tracks, someone who doesn't want the police to know, she's going to sit there and say, I murdered them, you got me, it was terrible. No. So she's going to talk about things that interest her. If she was into, football, she'd be talking about football. You heard from Detective Messer, it's very common when we're waiting around with a defendant who's invoked their rights that we just sit and we talk about other things. Whatever is interesting them. And to her, she's interested in that stuff. She gets on her Tumblr and writes stories. She loves the Ice Princess story, and she's changed it. And she puts her own characters in it. That's her hobby. That's her interest. That's the things she likes to do. The Elsa costume in the Elsa book. Do we know why she got the book? Maybe she got the book because she wanted some pictures of Elsa while she's trying to draw or put together her costume. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Lots of people cosplay, which is called where you dress in costume of different characters. Teenage Mutant Ninja. You heard Dr. Lazaro talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's no evidence of any psychosis in those phone calls that you just heard, is there? She understands what they're asking her. She's responding back. No evidence of any psychosis. She changed the Yahoo account when she was there. She learned she got on to change the password. That's someone who's functioning very well up here, not someone who's manic and psychotic and doesn't know what's going on and what they're doing. All of those actions show she was not psychotic. Now, in some respects, ladies and gentlemen, most people who kill generally have some mental issues. Most people who don't kill, so it's common for people who kill to have mental issues. And I want to point you to a thing here that I think is important, because we are admitting she does have a mental illness. We're not contesting that. We understand that. It says, although insanity is a defense, mental or psychiatric conditions not constituting insanity are not defenses to any crime in this case. That's important, ladies and gentlemen, because if you believe she knew what she was doing, she knew the consequences, and she knew it was wrong, then if she could be full-blown schizophrenic, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. She's still guilty. She's not insane. Just because you have a mental disease or defect does not make you insane. Please remember that when you go back there. Because this second half of this is what's important. This is what distinguishes it. Because lots of people have mental conditions, and just because you have a mental condition doesn't mean you have a right to kill. We've talked about the schizophrenic who's working as a lawyer. There are people with mental diseases and defects all around this country who are functioning, working properly, and not killing people because they know it's wrong. And so did she. She admitted it was wrong. She admitted to Dr. Lazaro. Dr. Lazaro asked her, did you know? Or I think she said it this way, you knew killing your mom and stepdad was wrong, didn't you? And she said, yeah, I did. She admits it's wrong. In fact, Dr. Heidi said, yeah, it's wrong. She knew it was wrong. I don't contest that. She knew it was wrong. Who wouldn't admit it? Oh, back to Dr. Ewan, the one with, I told you, a bias. Because listen to what he said. He wouldn't make an opinion about it. He says there's evidence to suggest she didn't know, or she knew it was wrong. There's evidence to suggest that. Ladies and gentlemen, there's not evidence to suggest that. There's evidence to scream that. There is so much evidence that she knew it was wrong. She was looking for help to cover up the murders, for dangerous areas in Tampa, people in low places, so she could get a fake ID, so she could maybe get away, because she knew she was going to be wanted. She lied to her family about when she was leaving. She talked to her mother while Bob Dean's body was right there in that house, and her mother was on her way saying, oh yeah, Mom, I'm up here, yeah, my roommates, I just met my roommates. She was covering up, she's lying, she moved her car a distance away, she cleaned the crime scene, she moved the body to the back room. She drove up to school. She talked about how she knew the police were coming. When she shot Bob Dean, she was scared because it was loud, and she was sure the police were going to come. Right after she shot him, she said, I thought, oh no, the police are going to come. Is that someone who knows it's wrong? Is that someone who knows what they're doing and knows the consequence of what they're doing? She lied to her uncle. She'd done nothing wrong. She said, well, yeah, Uncle, I killed him. Mom was going to kill me, so I had to kill her. And yeah, Bob was, he was kind of there, so I had to kill him too. If she thought she'd done nothing wrong, she would have talked about it. But she didn't. She said, oh, no, I didn't have anything to do with that. I mean, I've been up here. I've been up here. What evidence is there to show that she knew what she was doing? Because we've already discussed the wrongness. And by the way, she also got rid of the weapon. Someone who's not guilty or doesn't believe they've done anything wrong won't dispose of the weapon.
Does someone object at that point?
Let's move on.
So let's go back to, we've already established wrongness. And there are two prongs, or two ways you could go. And Ms. Hersey-Fulgara told you, you can ignore that second one. Well, no, because if you find that she knew what she was doing, and she knew the consequences, then you have to find out whether or not she believed it was wrong. So yes, the state is asking you to look at all of it, not just to these two, the whole thing. So, going back to the first one, did she know what she was doing and its consequences? Now,
Judge, I'm going to object. That's a misstatement of the instruction.
okay, the statement is she did not know what she was doing. Okay, so did she know what she was doing, or did she know the consequences of what she was doing? Now, Dr. Heidi and I had a little argument about the legal definition of insanity. Because you heard Dr. Heidi basically changed her opinion. And she's going to split hairs with me, but I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, she knew what I was asking her back in that January hearing. At that time, insanity was not an issue in this case. So when I asked her on that January hearing those two questions, because I didn't really think it was an issue, but when I asked her those two questions, her response to me was, I said, did she know what she was doing and it was wrong? Oh yes, she did. Did she meet the McNaughton standard of insanity? No, she did not. Basically, she was saying she was sane. But then she comes in before you and testifies and has changed that opinion now. But she wants to split hairs with me and say there's some other McNaughton standard that I don't know exists that doesn't include the term consequence. So I had to point her to a Supreme Court of Florida. Now, this is a criminology professor at USF. She knows the law. So I had to point her to it. I said, it says consequence in here under the McNaughton standard in Florida. She goes, oh, I didn't know that's what you were referring to. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. So Dr. Heidi was completely wrong. And if you listen to my cross, I did get her to basically agree that she knew what she was doing when she was shooting a gun. The indictment reads that she killed Robert Deans by shooting him. So what is the action of doing that we're here to determine? Did she know what she was doing? The doing in the indictment is the shooting him. What is the consequence of shooting him? He was killed. It's that simple. The defense wants to extend consequences into penalties he might receive in the future, or she might receive in the future. That's not what this says. Use your common sense.
I ask the court to instruct that it's the law as you will read it. Consequences.
I'm arguing the judge.
It's argument, ladies and gentlemen. I will remind you, though, that what the attorneys say is not evidence or the law. I will instruct you on the law. I will ask you to rely on your own recollection of the evidence in this case.
Use your common sense in what that means. What is the person doing in its consequence? Consequence is a synonym for result. What you're doing in the result. What she was doing was shooting Robert Deans in the back of the head. What was the result? What was the consequence? He was killed. It's that simple. Did she know when she was shooting him that she was going to kill him? Well, she told Dr. Lazaro that she shot and killed Bob instead of killing herself. She shot and killed Bob instead of killing herself. So she knew that by shooting him, she was going to kill him, the consequence. She told Dr. Lazaro that. Even Dr. Ewing came up with some weird theory that he believed the consequence she believed was that she should kill Robert Deans so that way her mother would kill her.
Objection, facts not in evidence.
I'll simply remind the jury to rely on your own recollection of what the facts in the case are, and that what the attorneys say is not evidence in the case.
Dr. Lazaro also says that she shot Bob once in the back of the head. That location is important. What does that tell you? She didn't shoot him in the back. She didn't shoot him in the leg. She didn't shoot him in the shoulder. She went right to the back of the head. Shows she knew what she was doing. She knew where she was putting that bullet. She told her brother, I shot Bob. I didn't think I could do it, but I did. What does that tell you? She knew she was doing it. She thought about it. She even says in that response, I didn't think I could do it. She was thinking about it. She knew what she was going to do. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. So let's say consequence doesn't mean killing, but if you use the common sense thought process, didn't know what she was doing or its consequences. What are the consequences of what she did, shooting him? Well, he was going to die. But let's say it says she's going to get in trouble. How much do we know that Nicole Nachtman knew she was going to get in trouble? First thing she says, that tells the doctors, is that once she shot Bob, she was worried that the police were going to come. And she took a couple of sleeping tablets. She also flees, obviously, the minute she shoots Miriam Deans. She gets rid of the weapon. She heads up to Tallahassee. She lies to people. She lies to her uncle. She lies to the people. She knows she's in trouble. She knows the consequences. She's an average to above average intelligence. She said goodbye to the people that were most important in her life. David, Laura, and Joey. She basically told them all her goodbye. She told Laura, "You've been a good friend to me." She told Joey, "I'm going to miss you, Joey." The defense would have you believe that she was suicidal, and that's why she said it. Joey asked her, are you thinking this? She goes, "Oh, no. No. And that's when she whispers, "I did it. I shot him." Ladies and gentlemen, just a few more things and I will sit down. One of the things that the judge is going to read you is an instruction that says because your decision should not be based because you feel sorry for anyone or are angry at anyone. Ms. Nachtman, this look pretty pathetic over there.
I'm going to object in proper argument.
Let's move on.
You've seen her. You've heard about her hard life growing up. You are not to decide this case because you feel sorry for anyone. So if you feel sorry for Nicole Nachtman because she had a rough life, but you believe she did it and she knew what she was doing, your verdict must be guilty as charged. And you do not decide the case because you're angry at anyone. Even if you're angry at Miriam Deans, even if you feel like she was a terrible mom, you don't, if you believe she did what she did and she knew what she was doing and she knew the consequences, she knew it was wrong, your verdict should be guilty as charged. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the work of someone who did not know what they were doing or the consequences or result of what they were doing or the wrongness. This was the work of a person with a mindset to rid their life of a burden for them. Someone who thought out and planned, granted not a mastermind, but clearly had some plan. Someone who tried to cover their tracks. Someone who killed 2 innocent, unarmed people by surprise. That someone, ladies and gentlemen, is Nicole Nachtman. We have no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that upon reviewing all the evidence in this case, you will return a verdict as charged of guilty of 2 counts of murder in the first degree. Thank you.